I mean, in physical meeting is generally hard to have the first session after lunch. It seems that in virtual meeting doesn't change much.
True.
Okay, welcome to Studio Trieste, to EuroDIG 2021, day 0 in the afternoon. We are going to open with another pre-event that is the NRI assembly that is going to happen in 4 parts. And let me just quickly read the session rules for everybody. Please enter with your full name. To ask a question, raise hand using the Zoom function. For those who have the old version, who are used to the old version of Zoom now, the raise hand function is under reactions on the far bottom right. You will be unmuted when the floor is given to you. And when speaking, switch on the video and state your name and affiliation. Chat will not be stored or published. Do not share links to the Zoom meetings, not even with your colleagues. And having done this housekeeping, let me give the floor to Mark Carvel, Internet governance expert, who will start this session.
Well, thank you very much, Roberto, for the introduction. And thank you also to Sandra for inviting me to participate in the NRI Assembly with this first part, which is an update on a very important process led by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, with regard to the objective of promoting greater digital cooperation and strengthening the governance mechanisms, including specifically the IGF. And of course, that whole agenda has important ramifications for national and regional IGFs like EuroDIG as channels for stakeholder engagement, for developing multi-stakeholder process throughout the global ecosystem. And of course, regional IGFs and national IGFs have an increasingly important role to play in the whole moving forward of the internet governance ecosystem. Taking into account what the high-level panel that the UN Secretary General convened has developed in its report for recommendations to strengthen the internet governance processes, and specifically the IGF, in advancing digital cooperation and its contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's a huge contextual backdrop to this specific focus we have today on the IGF and the proposals to strengthen the IGF, which were set out in, well, initially in a set of options and recommendations, which talked about establishing a high-level leadership group within the IGF structure, in addition to the multi-stakeholder advisory group, the MAG, which will continue to have an operational role primarily, as it was described in the options paper, to develop the program for the IGF and so on. This high-level group would be a smaller entity comprising, it was envisaged, ministers, CEOs, high-level people active in the whole area of digital policy, implementing digital transformation, and internet governance policy generally. So it'd be a smaller group, and it would create links to other processes, other fora, where decisions would be taken. That was the conceptual rationale behind having this separate, smaller group, that it would provide linkages from the IGF that were perceived by the high-level panel as being missing or inconsistent, to deliver the outcomes from the IGF discussions to decision takers in governments, in private sector, across the world. So this group would have that kind of remit, it was envisaged. It would not be a decisional group, that was made clear from the start, but it would provide inputs. And that's where I think a lot of the discussion subsequently has been focusing. Well, how will this group interact with the MAG, the multi-stakeholder advisory group, with the IGF community, in terms of inputs, contributing to strategic thinking and so on. So it started to create a lot of interest, while there was general support for the concept of some strengthening through having high-level leadership. I think throughout the consultations that have happened since this proposal emerged, there has been broad support for that, and I'll touch on that in very shortly. So that's the origins of this proposal for a multi-stakeholder high-level board, a kind of a smaller strategic thinking group with high-level participation. It's created a lot of interest because it raises the question of how you can reconcile sort of a new strategic governance mechanism like this, a smaller board, with the well-established multi-stakeholder bottom-up characteristics of the IGF that were set out way back in 2005 in the Tunis agenda that was agreed at the UN World Summit on the Information Society, the WSIS. How do you reconcile bottom-up multi-stakeholder engagement with creating a smaller governance entity which would deal with some strategic issues and so on? How's that going to work? And I think that's what's generated a lot of discussion and expressions of concern that maybe the fundamental sort of ethos that was agreed way back in Tunis is going to be compromised in some way when you have high-level people charged with some kind of strategic role that some might see as an oversight role, superior to the bottom-up policy development process, the program setting for the IGF and so on. So it's generated a lot of discussion, as I say. There have been lots of consultations on this, and to their credit, in the relatively newly created Office for the Technology Envoy, the Tech Envoy's Office of the Secretary General, together with the IGF Secretariat, have been leading a lot of these consultations, and with the aim of securing broad support for implementing this proposal in a way that will command the support of stakeholders and establish credibility. But there's quite a long way to go, it seems, having followed these consultations, representing Sandra and the EuroDIG community. And you may know that I've led some of the consultations on this. EuroDIG held a EuroDIG Extra event on the 3rd of March, where we specifically looked at this issue. I was asked to moderate that session. And the messages from that EuroDIG Extra event were that there was indeed broad support for the idea of having a multi-stakeholder high-level board, that would relay outcomes, policy approaches and recommendations to decision takers in other fora and other process and so on. So it was the extra event reaffirmed broad support for the kind of concept of that. And this high-level board would provide a valuable bridge between discussion at the IGF, which is non-decisional, and the sort of audience, if you like, of the decision takers, where decisions are taken. That bridge function was agreed. There was support for the idea of the board having the ability to provide strategic inputs, but also concerned that the MAG should retain its essential authority and responsibility for developing the IGF program. That was a very clear message from the EuroDIG extra event. And another key point that came out of that discussion was that this board should not be a separate entity wholly detached from the MAG, that there should be some integration of the two, so that there would be no risk of the board developing a duplicating or inconsistent role or mission. The MAG should be able to work closely with this board. That was another point that came out with a lot of support from the EuroDIG extra discussion. And also there was underlining of ensuring maximum transparency of how the board was appointed, the process for recruiting members of the board, and so on. So those were the key points, I think, that came out of the EuroDIG extra event. And to bring you further up to date, a couple of weeks ago, on the 14th of June, the Tech Envoy's office and the IGF Secretariat had another webinar consultation. It was a very interactive event. It was very well attended. And a lot of these points that came out of EuroDIG consultations really came to the surface. And to be frank, I think the Secretariat and the Tech Envoy's office were rather taken aback by expressions of concern that still encircle this proposal, with regard in particular to its relationship with the MAG and its still unclear role with regard to its strategic remit. So you can find a summary of that webinar that I held a couple of weeks ago, I think, on the EuroDIG website. I captured some of the key notes from it. It was one thing that surprised me, and it may have surprised others, that it was emphasized by the IGF Secretariat, by Chenkatai and Masango, that the ultimate decisions about the characteristics, the composition of the board would lie with the Secretary General's office. So that's a point, I think, to take to think about carefully, in terms of transparency and accountability, and how this high-level board would be formed and who would be appointed to it. The Secretary General would have quite an important role, and you've also already got the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs having functions or a locus in these discussions, as well as the Tech Envoy's office. So a lot of these decisions are going to shift, if you like, from Geneva and the IGF Secretariat to, in effect, to New York, and stakeholders will want to make sure that those processes of discussions and decisions are transparent and fully accountable. Another point that came up from the Secretariat's updating was that it would be optional for the high-level board to meet in closed session under Chatham House rules. This, I think, alarmed some stakeholders who felt that this was compromising really the openness and transparency of the whole IGF modalities, if you like. And I think the Office of Tech Envoy and the Secretary can expect some serious pushback on that. Meetings should be completely open and transparent. Another interesting point that came up in discussions was, well, what kind of people are going to be on this group? It was made clear by the Secretariat that it would be a small group, that they were aiming for high-level people. And if these people are going to be ministers from individual governments, there was concern that that might not work easily. Ministers don't have easy facility to participate in complicated internet governance discussions. They usually rely on officials, and I speak as a former official having to advise ministers. They rely on senior officials really to steer their contributions, which are time limited. Ministers have enormous portfolios to manage. So are they really expecting ministers to participate? Maybe they should aim for senior policymakers from government, and likewise, and from the private sector and civil society, you'd have, highly respected, very experienced senior people from those quarters participating in the group, in this small group. So a lot of questions about that were raised, and I think the whole question about the relationship with the MAG was a big issue in this webinar consultation a couple of weeks ago. And there was a strong consensus, I think, from the participating stakeholders that the board should be integrated within the MAG. You should not be a separate entity. It should be highly integrated in the MAG, and the MAG might well indeed have a role in nominating who participates in this high-level board. There are other points raised about where's the voice of youth in this process. Maybe that should be, certainly my personal view, it should be taken into account when identifying people to be on the board, and also the scope of the board's work. I think I'll finish there, Roberto. I feel I might have gone over time, but it's an important issue. It's an important milestone in the evolution of the IGF. It's one that has stakeholder support, but there's a lot of serious thinking to be done in terms of clarifying the detail and process and so on. And certainly the Tech Envoy's office, Yuping Tan was the lead for that, left us with the message that they had to do some rethinking. They had to examine some of these key issues about the relationship with the MAG, who's going to be on it, openness, transparency, process for nominations, and so on. And so we can expect further consultations from the Tech Envoy's office, from UNDESA, and from the IGF Secretariat, and EuroDIG should continue to engage directly and consult the stakeholders across the whole European continent, because it's an important step. I hope that's been helpful. I'm happy to take questions and reactions and comments. I hope I've covered all the salient points. So I hand back to you, Roberto, do I? Or unless Sandra wants to make a comment. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if somebody wants to make a comment, or what's the plan to have questions at the end, but if we use 20 minutes each, there will not be a lot of time at the end. So I assume I shall go to the next speaker, that is Andrea Beccalli. And Andrea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you for EuroDIG for hosting this session. Thank you, Mark, for this update. Actually, it was very helpful, useful. I wasn't following that closely. My colleagues were. So it was a good learning for me, and indeed it's an interesting process. And some of the criticism of the assets, it reminds me the early days of this whole process. So we see that there are some trends that keep repeating themselves. So, but moving on ICANN's role in supporting NRIs and the IG discussion in general. I also want to pay tribute to this one. I don't know if you can see it. And this is another thing that we are missing from the virtual events. We don't have these very useful gadgets that kind of reminds you where you were and how fun it was, but we'll go back there soon. So I'll try to not to take too much time on that and kind of put all the different points of ICANN support for NRIs, and I don't know how many NRIs are there participating. I saw Stephanie, I saw Fotion, I saw Liana. So particularly for those that are involved in NRI, I think that would be most interesting. Okay, so ICANN has a long history of supporting IGFs at all levels. It really goes back into the whole WSIS process, and the very first global IGF, and that goes all the way to the bylaws which will be the mandate of ICANN, supporting a stable, resilient, and secure DNS, but in a way also supporting the multi-stakeholder model and being a not-for-profit. We had also the possibility to contribute from our budget to the global IGF, funding into the IGF the same spirit, the same goal, particularly from at the beginning when the global IGF was very much more focused on the technical governance of the internet. Now in ICANN we call it technical internet governance. So that was even more prominent, but that doesn't mean that we stopped doing that. And the kind of support that ICANN put into the global IGF and the national IGFs, I haven't done the math, but it would be good probably to do the math. But I think in these 17 years or something, I think we go in the millions, in the 6 figures number. I remember because I would just join ICANN with I think a top contribution to the global IGF, I think in 2013, when the Indonesian government figured out that they didn't want to support the global IGF. So ICANN and other stakeholders joined with hundreds of thousands of dollars to support the global IGF. And as I was saying, for ICANN, the value of doing so, and since we started contributing to the NRIs, is very much recognizing kind of sister organizations that continue the discussion among the same approach and the same lines. And that for us is a key value. It's a value of engagement, is a value of meeting stakeholders, of bringing stakeholders inside ICANN, of bringing stakeholders into getting used to this different model of governance. And even now, when the discussion within the national and regional IGFs or the global IGFs moved partially, but in big chunks of the discussion of the main sessions of the workshops moved away from the so-called technical internet governance. They went more into the application layers. Even then, that doesn't mean that ICANN has lost an interest or will lose an interest at one point. As I was saying, our support really goes into even the model itself. And on that, we did in ICANN back in 2020 an internal assessment, kind of an internal study to see, where are we supporting national and regional IGFs? Why are we supporting those? Kind of tidying up a bit our books internally and sharing even within the organization some best practices. And we came out with a document which is still an internal document. It's not for sharing, but there is nothing secret there. And in this document, so many years after ICANN started supporting that, we still found out that we are supporting those because they're very much and large supporting the very same goals and values that we did at the beginning. And we then moved into kind of doing kind of a repository of best practices. And we found out that in ICANN, we went so much into the support of NRIs that in some cases, we kind of kickstarted them, like ICANN board members or ICANN fellows or ICANN staff. They were at the origins of national regional IGFs, particularly in countries where there is not so much participation on these topics. People that usually started following ICANN, whether it be because they were a GAC representative or they were managing the top level domain at the national level, they started also getting interested into the larger topic, into the model, and then from there they moved on in launching the whole national regional IGFs. And that's something that we kind of found out in this internal review that happened a lot. It happened a lot in basically across all continents. We had instances where we kind of bootstrapped a national regional IGF. And from this exercise, we kind of gathered what we found out, just confronting all these NRIs that we supported. What we found out that in our view are, and let you just pull out the documents, of course, in this. Here you have it. Which are the elements of success? And as I said, this is an internal document, but there is nothing that's secret. But I'm going to read out some of those to you, and I think that's important for this discussion. So we looked at those good practices, and so we listed 6 of those. The first one is the effectiveness, and effectiveness, it's kind of in itself is a different benchmark to evaluate if it's a difficult index, and I think the global IGF has been struggling with that for many years. But one of the first elements that we found out in that was whether the national regional IGF, the NRI, was an open enough platform for discussion of IG issues that was valuable in exchanging experiences, best practices, and if it was more than just an annual event. And there was also another element of effect of kind of tracking and testing the effectiveness. And we saw indeed that many NRIs started as an annual event. They built a community around an annual event. And then they were able to move from only organizing one conference into doing more than that, whether it be publishing a newsletter, doing a workshop on a specific issue, doing trainings. And this is something that we really appreciate, and we kind of keep looking for that in the national regional initiatives. Then we looked into the well-structured program committees. We kind of saw that there is a large variety of organization model and structures in the NRI's families. And we looked at the toolkit as a very good move from the global IGF to give some consistency, some directions to all the NRIs. And, assessing whether the program committee is truly multi-stakeholder, is open, is committed, is comprised by, by people that knows the subject, that, they are able to be recognized by the community. this is something that makes kind of design a lot of the success of an NRI. How many minutes more do I have? Because I'm realizing that I'm just on the second one. Sandra, can you help with that, or Roberto?
You have 10 minutes.
Okay, so second, I have 4 more, and then just concluding the lines. Perfect. So on that, we kind of insisted a lot and on organizing and ranking the NRIs on that one, program committee. Then the well-balanced participation. You know, we wanted to have we wanted to see whether not only on the program committee side the same multi-stakeholder participation is reflected on the participation side, and that I think it's a good index of the openness of the model. So an NRI has to be open and inclusive, and for us, then it's a good opportunity for us to engage and to support. So the well-balanced participation. Now, that has another dimension in that, which we saw that not in all IG processes, the bottom-up principle is that easy to implement. You know, we always push for the bottom-up, but sometimes we see that it's not always happening, but that doesn't diminish the power, the impact and the interest for us to support. So sometimes, we have to kind of go around that one. If it's not bottom up, but it kind of fulfills the first 3, then it's good enough for us to engage. But this is still a very important principle. We always try to support it. So well-balanced participation, but then with the bottom-up elements that has to be taken in consideration. Then, and similar to that one, the agendas, the meaningful and bottom-up built agendas. We saw that the most successful one, the one that we supported, we want to support in the future, are those IGFs that have an agenda, they choose the topic through a process of consultation that is open, that engages as much as possible all the different communities, and these are topics that are relevant, particularly relevant to the region or country. So that's something that we started really seeing in NRIs, where at the beginning a lot of the agenda were kind of replication of the global IGF agenda, of the main theme, and kind of replicating that in a kind of a medium fashion. We actually wanted to see more and more the local topics coming up from the bottom up. So even if the program committee, the whole thing is not organized bottom up, but at least the program has to. And the top-down programs where a bunch of people calls another bunch of people for having a session. It does happen. We did support those, but we wanted to be tighter on those. And that's, kind of a note of caution. That doesn't mean that if in the agenda there is nothing about ICANN, we won't support it. It's, as I said, the discussion moved beyond, only technical internet governance, and we welcome that. And for us, the fact that it's not strictly related on the DNS, there is nothing about the DNS or DNS abuse or whois or any of those topics that keeps people mad at ICANN, that doesn't mean that we won't support it. Actually, it's even better for us, because we want, we have an ICANN meeting for that. We want to broaden the community, and then for us, it's still an opportunity to go to an IGF and say, hey, by the way, you may learn more about that. If you're interested, you can come to an ICANN meeting, and that's the place where you can have more of the discussion. So that's I think it's a key element to pass also in this NRI assembly. And then that was written in 2020, but it started before the pandemic, and one of the elements was remote participation accessibility. And we saw already back then that there was a good practice that most, if not all, the NRIs started implementing. We supported a lot of those NRIs landing our online tools, and we do that also for the global IGF. And I mean, this is something that even today I've been playing around with my avatar in the EuroDIG. I couldn't find one with male with long hair, so I kind of complained on that. But you know, I kind of really appreciate how much in the NRI, even before the pandemic, and of course now with the pandemic, it's kind of you are forced to, but the inclusion passed through the online remote participation. And then the last one, and I'll close with a couple of sentences after that one. We wanted to see evolution, new ideas. We don't want to see IGFs at the national level or the local level that replicates the same agenda, the same program committee, the same board, the same position in the same board, kind of the same people, years after year, again and again. No, we wanted to see an evolution of the model, an evolution with new ideas, also an evolution and kind of an effort from NRIs to kind of walk with their own legs. We saw that there is a lot of dependencies of NRIs from international sponsors and donors, but then they're not able that much to engage with national donors, and and then they become overly dependent from us, and and kind of there is kind of a relationship on how much we're dependent from us and how much you can impact at the local level. We also kind of saw that. So that's something that we definitely look for, continue supporting the NRIs, the evolution of bringing in new ideas, bringing in new people, and engaging with new formats. And that these are the six key elements that we look for now when we support a national regional initiative. Just to conclude, as part of our general support to NRIs and the IGF, we also support the IGFSA. Chris Mondini, my colleague, my boss on in my team, the Vice President for Europe for Engagement, he also sits on the board of the IGFSA. So, and our contribution is in kind with 20% or something like that of Chris' time on dedicated on the board of the GFSA, but also in money, and we give money to the GFSA. I think if just back of the envelope, very rough estimate, I think every year we give something like 200,000 at least in cash to the global IGF, NRIs, and a GFSA, and there is probably another 70 or 90,000 US dollars on in-kind support between time of staff. Actually, time of staff is not calculated on that, so it's our engagement is there. Okay, I close here. I have some more notes and observation, more kind of my personal experience in that, but I want to leave time for questions, and then I'll stay for the rest of the session. So happy to share more after. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, for this nice description of the situation. I think it's time to give the floor to our next speaker, that is Nigel Hickson from the IGF Supporting Association. Nigel, you have the floor.
Yes, and good afternoon, good morning. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Good. Well, it's a delight to be able to talk briefly to you today, and it was really good to follow Andrea. Always nice to follow Andrea. You need a haircut, but apart from that, it's it's great. I'm just speaking as a sort of member of the committee of the Internet Governance Forum Supporters Association. So no more and no less than that. So, but I'll just outline a few things about the IGFSA, and then really happy to take questions. So I'm hoping that I might be able to share my screen. And I'm going to, if I can share my screen, I don't know if you can see that, if that's working. And I'll play this.
Nigel, we can't see your screen.
Ah. Okay. Let me. Oops. So you can just see me, so to speak. Let me see if I can share my screen, because I have a video to show you. Perhaps yeah. Let me see if you can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Let me see if this works. Can you hear him?
No.
Nigel, Nigel.
Yeah.
If you want to share the sound, you need to kind of do a little trick with Zoom.
Yeah.
And,
Look, I won't worry about sharing the sound.
okay.
But what I just wanted to do was to just say a couple of things about the IGFSA. But I don't need the sound to do that. So let's not worry. So the Internet Governance Forum Supporters Association, as I said, was set up, obviously to support the IGF. I mean, you know a lot about the IGF already. You know the IGF it is funded through a trust fund, which is administered by the IGF. And this trust fund is a voluntary trust fund, which businesses and governments and other supporters contribute to. And, from time to time, the trust fund has grown and the trust fund has waned. And the trust fund is very important. Not only does it support the operation of the IGF at the annual level, which of course is very important indeed, and funds some of the contributions that are needed to run the annual event. But the trust fund also the trust fund also contributes to the national and regional initiatives, and as Andrea said, is that is the, if you like, the lifeblood of the IGF. But those contributions from time to time go up and down, of course, as governments find funding difficult or businesses find funding difficult, and people come in and out. So the Supporters Association, if you like, plugs a bit of a gap in that funding structure, and indeed contributes to both regional and to national initiatives. And the trust fund has been going, was set up in 2014, and it was set up as an initiative. And the video that I was hoping to show you was from Marcus Kuma, who has acted as chair of the IGFSA for some years, and has been a really an inspiration, if you like, in terms of the in terms of what the IGFSA has done. Let me show you this slide. Let me show you this if I can. So this is the right. So I'm going to try and get this right again. Not very good at this. Not very good at this stuff, but I'm going to try and share the right screen this time. Right. And this is the So I think this should work, hopefully. So hopefully you'll see that what I'm sharing there. Can you see something? Yeah. So this is what the this is the IGFSA contributions that they've made over since 2014. So you see it's contributed itself $290,000 to the IGF Trust Fund. It's contributed nearly $500,000 to national and regional IGF initiatives. It's contributed to 145 national IGF initiatives, and it's contributed 47 it's contributed to 47 regional initiatives since 2014. So I think that in itself is if you like a testament to what the IGFSA has done in this area. Let me tell you a bit about how the IGFSA works. We have a committee of a number of representatives. The committee is elected in an annual meeting that takes place of the forum at an annual IGF. So this year, of course, it will be. We'll have an annual meeting in Katowice in Poland, at which the committee will be, subject to re-election. So it's a very democratic process, and the committee people are on the committee in their own right, if you like, and hopefully they contribute ideas and they contribute their skills. And as Andrea said, ICANN has been very generous in Chris Mondini is on the committee, and indeed ICANN is a funding contributor to the IGFSA. We have a secretariat which is provided by .Asia, who are a great bunch of people, and they provide the secretariat and run much of what the IGFSA does. But the important thing about the IGFSA is the membership. The important thing is that a supporters association has to have supporters, and therefore the important thing is not the committee, it's the membership itself. And that's what I think is really important. Membership on the website, you can see how to become a member. To become an individual member is only $25 a year. To become a corporate member is only $100 a year. And that, if you like, signals your support, signals your appreciation for the IGFSA, and that funding directly helps us. I mean, there's no other reason to raise funding apart from to support the IGF. And we support the IGF by contributing, as I say, to the trust fund, and we support the IGF by contributing to national and regional initiatives. And we are indeed, as I speak, so to speak, that's terrible English. I'm not very good at English, but you know what I mean. We are supporting regional initiatives. EuroDIG is brilliant. We're giving some support for EuroDIG. I know it's not much, Sandra, but I mean, EuroDIG is our friends and our colleagues, but we're also supporting a number of national initiatives that are happening in the next few weeks. And you might say, well, surely, what is happening? But of course, these virtual meetings, whether they're virtual or hybrid, what we have found, they equally need support. If you're, and you don't need me to tell you this, that the costs of running a virtual meeting are not trivial, as of course we find out. So that's what I really wanted to say. The website allows you to directly click through and to apply for funding for a national or a regional initiative. We're open to fund these initiatives. The only real criteria for funding initiatives is that the national and regional initiative has to be recognized by the IGF Secretariat. You can't just say, I'm going to do a national IGF. It has to be recognized as a national or regional initiative, and it has to be, the location has to be either from the global south or of being of an economy in transition. So those are the, that's the if you like the criteria. But we're open to applications, and of course the committee, the IGF Secretariat is the IGFSA is open for discussion on these funding opportunities. So I think I want to leave it there. Many of you will know something about this already, of course, so I'm speaking to an extent to an educated audience here, but please do look at the latest newsletter, which has a lot of information in it. We have a very professional secretariat. We're very lucky indeed in having Jennifer Chung as leading our secretariat, and really in a professional way. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, for your description of the supporting association. And I think that we have time for questions. I don't know how we are going to handle the question. Yeah, Sandra.
Thank you, Roberto, and also thank you, Nigel, Andrea, and Mark for this great update. I think this more or less covered quite some of the essence what NRIs are concerned with. I want to mention one point. It became clear, and Andrea said it very clearly, that we should definitely avoid that NRIs are getting dependent on certain organizations for the financial support, and I fully agree that that's an issue. Last year during the pandemic, for the first time, our budget was, not the budget, but the income, our donations were decreasing. And so at EuroDIG, we started a donation system. I know the IGFSA has a tool, a kind of a donate button where every member or every person, individual, organization can basically do a donation. And we have it up for, I would say, since the registration for this year's EuroDIG was open. And I would just like to share with you an observation. It's up since April now, and we received 3 donations from 3 individual people. And I must say, this is really surprising for me. We announced it in our newsletter, and also when you do the registration, you can basically find this bottom. I wonder what this community, and I ask for your opinion on this. If why is it the way that these national and regional IGFs and also the global IGFs are supposed to be for free? I mean, of course, they need to be for free for the participants, but there is not much of support for voluntary contribution. And I mean, we would not ask for big money, but if every participant gives like €5, I think every NRI would definitely benefit from this, and the entire concept could continue. I fear that since donations are going down, I have the feeling in many places, not only at EuroDIG, that we might not keep the standard, neither be able to improve the standard of what we are doing here in terms of how we organize, how creative we can be, how much we can promote and all this. And I would like to hear from the participants what they think about this issue of asking for individual donations, if that is too much of an ask, or if we are just doing it the wrong way, or what hampers participants to make even small donations, or maybe even from the IGFSA, how it works in your case, if you can share that information.
Chris, you have the floor.
Thanks, Roberto. Hi, everyone. Chris Buckridge here from the RIPE NCC. I mean, I think there's a couple of things I want to respond to. I think thanks particularly, Nigel, for the update on the IGFSA. I think it's a really interesting and important, potentially important group or organization, because I think we're all struggling, and Sandra sort of highlights this, with how to fund these initiatives, this work, these projects. They don't come free, and there isn't a sort of standard model for funding that's working right now. I think the IGFSA is one possible way of addressing that, and the number of resource organizations, so the 5 RARs working together, have been significant sponsors or contributors, sorry, to the IGFSA in the past. But I think we've also been had concerns, which we've shared with IGFSA, with Marcus and others, about the limited range of contributors there. And I know the IGFSA is working hard on that, and I know they've made some positive moves in recent times to further broaden the base of contributors there. That needs to keep happening. And I think that's not just something for the IGFSA, it's for all of us here to think about, you know, is that a useful thing? And why is the IGFSA specifically such a good vehicle for this funding? Because I think if we can make that argument effectively, then that sort of entices people more to contribute via that channel. I mean, I think Sandra is right, and Andrea was correct in this as well. For all the IGFSA is great. We shouldn't have NRIs dependent on a single global kind of pot of money. I think, you know, the point of these events is they are targeted and built around local communities, either national or regional. And those stakeholder communities should see the value in contributing and making this happen. So we're all learning as we go, and I think the sort of make a contribution button that you're talking about, Sandra, is a really good initiative. And I certainly think it's not too much to sort of suggest to people when attending that, yeah, you contribute €5 or 10 euros or whatever, not as a mandatory thing, but really to sort of say, this doesn't come free. And if you can spare it, please look at contributing here. But I think, yeah, we're all learning this as we go. I think we're all sort of learning new way how to actually market this sort of stuff, if you will. So I think continuing to try and sort of innovate here and try new methods, but we certainly shouldn't be afraid of sort of saying to people, this isn't free. We need to pay for this somehow. If you see value in this, and we should explain that value if it's not immediately apparent, yeah, you should contribute.
Thank you, Chris. Other questions and comments?
Roberto, I can make a comment, but I realize that we are on the top of, are we at the end, no? The ends at...
Yeah, we are just, well,
okay.
We can eat a few minutes out from the break.
Okay. I mean, this is a very complex and interesting discussion. So I don't think we can really, even myself, I don't know where to start. But I think it's time for the NRIs, to bring the experience, and I would have expected more NRIs participate even in that session on that front. There are lots of elements here. It's kind of a car that has been designed when the petrol engine was the only thing, and then suddenly, the Tesla comes, and then you realize that many things of the petrol car weren't that efficient, but you're still driving it, and I think something changed. In the past years, and some change were sudden, of course, like the pandemic. Some change were more diluted in the time that led to this growing disengagement from many stakeholders into the NRIs, and into also this inability of many NRIs, even including the global IGF, to provide some of the responses that and answers that 15 years ago were only discussed in the global IGF, and suddenly you find them on the tip of your fingers when you open an app and you have to click on a new feature from the iPhone, or you're reading them about newspapers because the European Commission or whatever regulator is pushing some laws. And suddenly, you know, we have this huge audience that doesn't know really us. And then these topics are not us, meaning, you know, the global IGF, the national regional initiatives. And so, you know, there is a combination of things here. And of course, it's always easy to give answers in hindsight. But as I said, I think two major trends that we started seeing is that, you know, the over-reliance on the same donors from one particular part of the internet, the technical community, in a way also had an impact on the content and on the participation on that. And that kind of, you know, was good, was money, and it's still keeping, but it kind of prevented you to move to others. And kind of connected to that, the fact that when the whole world is dealing and struggling with issues of, you know, governance of the internet at the application layers, at the content layers, almost in, you know, very few countries, the NRI was the place to be, and therefore, you know, it's hard to ask donors to contribute to something that you never seen before, although these people were discussing these kind of topics. So I think that's quite relevant. And the way forward, you know, I don't see that bright. It's kind of hard to, you know, I don't have a ready solution for that, but starting looking at, you know, not looking at this model as the only one, and clearly seeing that it's not sustainable, it's not working that well, and trying new things like, you know, the direct donors, although, you know, they're difficult because you're used to get something for free for 15 years. When you see click and pay, even myself, I felt ashamed. I was like, well, I didn't even look at that. I didn't even consider giving some money myself. You know, because kind of you're used to having that. So I think there is also communication has to change on that. But I think it's worth it, even in EuroDIG and among us, to have a frank discussion on that and confront with others, because clearly not, you know, not looking at that doesn't help us in addressing it.
Thank you, Andrea. We have a last comment by Adam Peak before we close the session. Adam, you have the floor.
Thanks, Roberto. Hi, everybody. Yeah, just to sort of build on a couple of things Andrea said, really. And it may have been said earlier, I'm sorry I missed the start of the session. There are now 93 national IGFs. There are 19 regional IGFs. And with the global IGF, I think that's 113 events that are associated with the IGF totally. That's an awful lot to support, and they're increasing all the time. And there are, for the funders, as Andrea mentioned, quite often there will be related activities that we're also asked to support, such as the schools on internet governance. So while of course they're not NRIs, they do start to extend the general scope. So a thought, and of course providing individual donations is a good idea, and like Andrea, I didn't realize that I could, so I'm embarrassed by that and see what I can do. But I attended RightsCon, and ICANN also supports RightsCon, and one of the things that RightsCon has done this year is it has its usual, it's a fee-paying event. You pay a fee to participate, and the usual, you know, sort of menu of options for a private sector or not-for-profit or academic or whatever it may be, with a varying scale. But there was also free participation, so you could just register and attend for free. So if you turned that around and said that an NRI should always be free, and that's one of the things about the IGF generally, I think it's almost a requirement that there should be no participation fee. But that doesn't mean that you could actually voluntarily say that if you are a private sector organization, would you consider paying 125 euros, just a number off the top of my head, to participate in EuroDIG this year, or the Dutch IGF this year, or whatever, or the global IGF this year. And if you're a not-for-profit organization, perhaps you would, you know, participate for $50 or 50 euros a year. Reverse it round so that the fee is optional when it's a suggestion. It will always remain a free event. but to offer the opportunity for people to pay with a receipt, with an invoice, and all the things that a corporation or an organization would need. So just a thought, and I don't think it's something that, it's probably a bad idea, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And I think that it's time now to close this session, unless there's Sandra, if you want to intervene again.
Not just sorry, it's Sandra speaking. No, I don't want to intervene. I thank the others for their comments, and I made some more comments in the chat. I think that's really an interesting discussion, because looking at very successful conferences like South by Southwest or these kind of things, I mean, you're used to pay a huge fee, and sometimes I have the feeling that if you limit the access to an event or to something, then people want to come. But if it's all for free, then it's sometimes more difficult to engage people. That's my personal feeling over the many years that I'm struggling with the budget, with the funding, and looking how others are doing. And possibly we have to respect it as what it is. I'm a little bit clueless here and speechless, and I don't know how to overcome that issue in the future, because we are looking for sustainable funding and for sustainable budgets since the beginning, and it's still difficult. And not speaking about only EuroDIG, but also the global IGF and the many other NRIs.
Adam, is this a new hand?
It's an old hand, of course. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with these words, for sure, I think that we need to think about how to make the internet governance work sustainable. I'm also wondering whether the fact that we had the pandemic has changed something in terms of maybe lowering the interest and changed something also in the way people approach the internet governance. I think that when we resume normal operation, probably this is a discussion that we should start doing. So this said, there's now a coffee break, and the next session is at 15:15 and is the continuation of this session of NRI, and will be a round table. See you in something like 35 minutes. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Roberto.
Thank you. Thank you. See you later.
Thanks all. Bye.
Cheers, Chris.